The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The Chronicles of Narnia, one by C.S. Lewis. The Curiosity and the Greed. It was a cold winter day when Lucy, Edmund, Susan, and Peter Pevensie stumbled upon an old wardrobe while exploring the large, dusty house of Professor Kirk. The siblings had been sent to the countryside to escape the bombing in London, and they were eager to find something exciting to do. "I bet it's just a bunch of old clothes," Edmund said, wrinkling his nose as he peered into the wardrobe. "Oh, don't be such a spoil-sport, Edmund," Lucy replied, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Let's see what's inside." The four siblings pushed aside the coats and dresses. Behind the coats, they found not the expected wooden back of the wardrobe, but an endearing snowy landscape. As if stepping through a magical portal, they found themselves surrounded by snow-covered trees, their feet crunching satisfyingly in the frosty snow. "Wow," Lucy breathed. "We're outside." "But how did we get here?" Susan asked, looking around in confusion. "It must be magic," Peter said, his eyes wide with wonder. While they explored the winter forest, Lucy wandered away from her siblings. She was fascinated by the snow-covered trees and the living creatures among them. Suddenly, she stumbled upon an unusual creature which had a pleasant face, curly hair, a short pointed beard, slightly reddish skin, and two small horns on his forehead. He stomped through the snow on goat-like feet, wrapped snugly in his red woolen muffler. This was Mr. Tumnus, a fawn. "Would you like some tea and toast?" Mr. Tumnus asked, offering Lucy a warm smile. Feeling comfortable around him, Lucy nodded eagerly. They went to his cozy little cave, where she poured her heart out to Mr. Tumnus about the magical transition. From the professor's house to Narnia, her siblings, and their stunning new surroundings. Meanwhile, Edmund had wandered off in curiosity, ending up at a grandiose icy palace where he met a woman with long white hair and piercing eyes. The icy air around her seemed symbolistic of her frosty attitude, her voice cold and commanding. "Who are you?" Edmund asked, a feeling of unease settling in his heart. "I am the Queen of Narnia," she replied. "And you, my dear boy, are a traitor." Edmund felt a shiver of guilt as the Queen offered him a piece of candy. He accepted it, hesitantly, despite feeling that it was wrong to be accepting favors from the enemy. His guilt was compounded by a fascination towards the promise of power. As the afternoon grew into evening, Lucy felt a pang of worry for her siblings, but also a revolutionary feeling of parting from Mr. Tumnus and the enchanting world she had discovered. It was a mix of longing, sadness, and a lingering hint of joy, created from the magical moments she had experienced in Narnia. It was time to return home. "I should go back to my brothers and sisters," Lucy said reluctantly. Mr. Tumnus apologetically acknowledged her concern and escorted Lucy back to the border of the forest. Later, alone in the icy palace, Edmund reflected on his encounter with the White Witch. His mind was a turmoil, torn between loyalty to his siblings and the allure of power. He chewed on the candy, its sweetness choking him with guilt. Eventually, Lucy found herself back in the wardrobe, battling the heavy fur coats that separated Narnia and the professor's house. She stepped out, finding her siblings still searching for her. "There you are!" exclaimed Susan. We were worried." "I found a magical land," Lucy began, but her story was met with disbelief. "It's just a silly game," Edmund scoffed, although internally he was wrestling with the reality of his own experiences and the daunting choice he would soon have to make. The chapter concludes with the siblings continuing their pretend play, unaware of how their short foray into Narnia had turned their lives around. They were now on an incredible path that would lead them back to Narnia, to a destiny beyond their wildest imaginations. Allies in the snow. The crunch of snow underfoot was the only sound in the silent forest as the children made their way through the thick blanket of white. Cold nipped at their noses, and their breaths came out in visible puffs. They followed the frozen path of the river, their eyes scanning the surroundings warily. As they rounded a bend, the trees opened up, revealing a cozy-looking dam. Beyond it stood a snug little house that seemed to be burrowed into the bank. Here they met Mr. Beaver, a wise and kind-faced creature with wrinkled paws. He greeted them with a nod and a warm invitation to follow him inside. The warmth of a crackling fire enveloped them as they stepped into the beaver's home. Mrs. Beaver bustled about, her mouth holding a thread as she prepared a hearty meal. "You must be famished," she said, her voice as welcoming as the stew she ladled into bowls. As they ate, Mr. Beaver produced a handkerchief. "A friend of yours wanted you to have this," he explained. "It's a sign that you can trust us. We're all in this together now." Peter, the eldest, furrowed his brow. "But how can we rescue our friend from the White Witch? Her spies are everywhere." Mr. Beaver leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Most of them are on our side," he assured them, gesturing to the wooden walls. "The trees, the animals, even the snow itself is on our side." Susan, practical as always, asked, "But what about Aslan? Can he help us?" At the mention of Aslan's name, a hush fell over the room. Mr. Beaver's voice took on a reverent tone as he explained, "Aslan is the true king of Narnia. When he moves, the whole land moves with him. He will know how to save your friend and defeat the witch." The children nodded, their eyes shining with the newfound determination. They would face the witch, but not alone. With Aslan's guidance and the support of the beavers, they felt a spark of hope. Together they would fight for Narnia and their friend, determined to break free from the witch's icy grip. The betrayal. In the shadowy valley, where the fir trees loomed like silent sentinels, Edmund found himself, his thoughts a whirlwind of regret and fear. The White Witch's voice, smooth as silk yet cold as ice, broke the silence. "You did well to bring your siblings to me, Edmund." She cooed, her eyes glinting with malice. "Now, you shall have your reward." Realizing the gravity of his betrayal, Edmund had led his siblings into a trap, all for the sake of enchanted Turkish delight and the hollow promise of kingship. As the witch's dwarf tied his hands, Edmund's gaze found the distant outline of the stone table, the place of deep magic where traitors met their end. While the Pevensies made their way to Aslan's camp, guided by the beavers through the snow, their hearts were heavy with the knowledge of Edmund's treachery. They had trusted him, and now Narnia's fate hung in the balance because of his actions. Can we still save Edmund? Lucy whispered, her voice trembling. "We must try," Peter replied, determination etched on his face. "For Aslan and for Narnia." As they approached Aslan's camp, the great lion's golden eyes met theirs with a sadness that spoke volumes. "Edmund has chosen his path," Aslan said solemnly. "But we must not lose hope. There is still time to right the wrongs." Back in the valley, the witch, with a cruel smile, was ready to enforce the deep magic. "The law is clear," she hissed. "Every traitor's blood is mine." As she lifted her wand, the air grew tense with anticipation. But before she could strike, a mighty roar echoed through the valley, and Aslan, majestic and fierce, leapt into the fray, his presence alone enough to challenge the witch's claim. The sacrifice of a king. The moon hung heavy in the sky, casting a silver glow over the stone table where Aslan stood, his majestic mane flowing in the night breeze. The children, Peter, Susan, and Lucy, huddled together, a mix of fear and awe etched on their faces as they watched the great lion. "Are you sure there's no other way?" Peter's voice trembled slightly, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. Aslan's amber eyes held a deep sadness as he replied, "It must be this way for the deep magic to be satisfied. Fear not, for this is not the end." Edmund, who had been silent, stepped forward, his eyes downcast. "Aslan, I'm so sorry. It's all my fault." Aslan placed a gentle paw on Edmund's shoulder. "You have been forgiven, Edmund. Remember, every son of Adam has the chance for redemption." The witch approached, her knife raised high. Lucy clutched Susan's hand, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I can't watch this," she whispered. But Aslan's voice, strong and calm, filled the air. "Do not be afraid. When you face darkness, remember that light will always find a way to shine through." The blade descended. In the aftermath, the world seemed to hold its breath. The children huddled close, their sobs the only sound in the cold night. They could not fathom a Narnia without Aslan, their hearts heavy with a grief too deep for words. Yet, as dawn approached, a gentle warmth began to spread through the air. The first light of morning revealed a sight that would be etched in their memories forever. Aslan stood before them, resurrected by the power of sacrifice and love. With renewed hope, the children joined Aslan as they prepared to face the witch and her army. The battle would be fierce, but they knew now that no darkness could extinguish the light Aslan had ignited in their hearts. The sacrifice of the king had set them free, and they would fight to ensure that freedom reigned in Narnia once more. The battle commences. The day arrived for the decisive confrontation. Aslan's forces assembled at the fords of Baruna, ready to challenge the White Witch and her legion. Peter, Susan, Lucy, and Edmund, alongside Narnia's denizens, awaited the impending clash. Aslan briefed Peter on the strategy. Divide and conquer, with Peter leading the assault on the castle. Despite his trepidation, Peter accepted the charge. Aslan, instilling confidence yet hinting at his possible absence, left the group contemplative. Dismissing Peter's suggestion for a defensive camp position, Aslan assured them of safety that night. Restless under a cloud of unease, the siblings sensed a troubling shift. The following dawn, battle erupted. Aslan, a figure of awe, anchored the fray. Peter, commanding the castle offensive, deployed centaurs and scouts with precision. Aslan, facing the witch alone, sent her retreating with a formidable roar. The Narnians, emboldened by Aslan's valor, engaged fiercely. Edmund, witnessing the witch's petrifying sorcery, intervened, challenging her dominion. As the witch prepared to curse him, Aslan re-emerged, disrupting her focus and disarming her. This pivotal moment spurred a Narnian resurgence, culminating in Peter's decisive blow to the witch, liberating Narnia from her tyranny. Rejoiced as the witch's spell was broken and those turned to stone were restored to flesh and blood, the creatures of Narnia, once oppressed, now roared in victory, their joyous cries echoing through the land. Aslan's triumph not only shattered the witch's power, but also heralded a new era of peace and prosperity for Narnia. The Pevensey siblings, who had fought valiantly, were crowned as the new rulers, marking the beginning of a golden age. Together, they pledged to govern with justice and wisdom, guided by the lessons learned from Aslan and the great battle they had won. Resurrection and victory. The first light of dawn crept across the sky, casting a soft glow over the landscape. The air was still, heavy with anticipation. In the distance, the sounds of the ongoing battle echoed, a grim reminder of the cost of freedom. Lucy and Susan stood together, their hearts filled with joy and relief as they gazed upon Aslan, his mane glistening in the morning light. The great lion stood before them, strong and warm. The sisters embraced Aslan, tears of happiness streaming down their faces. As the light of dawn grew stronger, the girls noticed the change in the air, a sense of renewal that filled their hearts with hope. The battle cries in the distance began to fade, replaced by the sounds of triumph and rejoicing. Aslan turned, his eyes reflecting the promise of a new beginning, and beckoned the children to follow him. Together they walked towards the rising sun, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by an unbreakable bond of friendship and courage. The joy of freedom. The courtyard of Cair Paravel was alive with magic, a stark contrast to the cold, oppressive silence that had once reigned. The statues stirred to life. A fawn's eyes blinked open, a centaur's muscles twitched, and a giant stretched his massive arms, each movement a symphony of cracks and whispers as the stone fell away. Lucy watched, her heart swelling with joy. "Look, they're alive!" she exclaimed, her voice a melody of wonder. Edmund stood beside her, his eyes wide with amazement. "It's like a dream," he murmured. "A dream of spring after the longest winter." The children joined hands with the newly freed Narnians, their laughter mingling with the sounds of the forest coming to life. The once muted colors of the world now burst forth in vibrant hues, painting the scene with the promise of a new beginning. The Narnians erupted into cheers at the announcement of the coronation of their new kings and queens. The ceremony was a whirlwind of color and music, with Lucy, Edmund, Susan, and Peter standing before the assembly, their crowns shining like beacons of hope. As they took their places on the thrones, the courtyard transformed into a vibrant tapestry of sights, sounds, and scents. The air was filled with the sweet aroma of blooming flowers, and the sound of laughter and music mingled with the trees. The celebration was a testament to the enduring spirit of Narnia, now free from the tyranny of the White Witch. The four siblings, adorned with their regal crowns, looked out upon their kingdom, their hearts full of hope for the future. Together they would embark on a reign of wisdom, justice, and the kind of adventures that come with the dawning of a new age. The return and the vigil. The golden light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a warm glow on the castle of Cair Paravel. Inside the grand hall, Peter's voice was steady and sure. "Narnia is free, but we must not forget the lessons of the past." Susan, with eyes thoughtful, agreed, "It's up to us to ensure that peace prevails." Edmund stood firm, his sense of justice newfound. "We'll face any challenge together." Lucy smiled. "Aslan's spirit is always with us." In the throne room, the wise old badger, Truffle Hunter, addressed them, "Your Majesties, you must be prepared to face challenges from within and without." The children, their faces set with determination, knew that they had a long road ahead, but they were ready to face it as a family.